figure enthusiasts, and welcome to yet another review. And today is a big one because I want to show you one of my favorite figures from 2025. Yeah, it's a bit late for a highlight reel, but I thought better late than never. And don't worry, it is still a spectacular figure. But before we unbox and discuss her, let's wait a bit longer and also analyze her box design as well. So at first glance, this is just your typical window box, rather large in size, but if we take a closer look, there are still a few things on display that makes this a nice container for her. It all starts with this borderless front window, far less common than you might think, and in addition to this front window that stretches from left to right, there is also a secondary window on this side, but rather than let us glance inside the box, it is covered up with a photo of the figure, almost like a picture frame. The box also features those stylized graphics in the form of blossoms and the two swords. Some of them are even punched out, providing a nice little border around the see-through windows. The backside is restrained in terms of warnings, but sadly no detailed photos are available. But you can call the manufacturer or write them an email and maybe complain about how their logo and name looks and sounds more like the producer of irrigation products rather than a figure brand. Speaking of names, the box also features the credits for the 3 most important people during her development phase, that of course being the sculptor, the illustrator, and the person that was responsible for painting the prototype. Last but not least, there is also a bit of silver metallic foil that spells her name, once on the top and once front and center. So altogether a very beautiful box that left a good first impression. To reinforce the pleasant unboxing experience, the first thing you will be greeted with is this small plastic card of the figure that features an illustration of her on it. Don't know why it's there or what people might use it for, because sadly there is no space on the base that would accommodate this little gimmick. But it's there. If we unbox any further, we will be greeted with 2 sets of blister, one that features the figure and its base, and one that houses all the other parts like the phantom swoosh or the swords. And once everything has been taken out of the blister, we can now finally mount the figure, and yeah, this is basically where the good first impression came to an abrupt halt. First you must put Youmu onto her base, where her knee peg didn't fit at all and I had to shave off bits to make it work. Then you must put one sword on her back that is only held in place by this tiny plastic part. It felt very stressful to put it on because I constantly had the feeling something would break. After that you must complete the sword with a strap around her waist that latches onto it with 2 pegs, and since the sword isn't really fixed in place by much, you might have already guessed how satisfying this step was. Next up is the second sword that consists of 2 separate pieces that also have a strange pressure point for connecting them, and for its placement you might consider consulting the black and white instructions to see where it belongs. And finally, after all that, place the phantom part of her onto this lamp. But again, feels a bit awkward because this rather long tail will constantly bash against the figure until you finally find the right angle to push it onto this rather long peg. Is it impossible to mount? Of course not. But I'm wondering if it has to be this stressful. Sometimes figures do have a bad fit, but I question if the people who made those really test this out to begin with. But now, since she's on full display, the feeling of excitement is immediately coming back. I mean, look at her with this highly dynamic pose, her determined expression, and this awesome themed base that totally feels like cheap and squishy plastic. Of course, this is not made out of real stone, nor is it polycast resin, but still, for some reason I was kinda disappointed by the looks and feel of this base. Not only is she a bit softer and more rounded than I would have imagined it to be, but also the paint job looks a bit hasty on some areas when the shades do not match the structure all that well. It also doesn't help that those 2 pieces of rubble here look like somebody took a Merci chocolate bar and simply spray painted over them. But I know what you now might think. Didn't this man on the screen say it was one of his favorite figures from last year, so why is he complaining so much then, huh? Well, because sometimes a figure that looked really stunning during its development phase and in promotional pictures can be a bit underwhelming at first glance. But at second glance, this one really offers a lot, and I fell back in love with the design and how it all comes together. Let's take for example this blue effect part that represents her phantom side. On its own, I immediately questioned why it's only semi-translucent in the back and why the sphere in front has this solid flatter look to it, but once it's just a part of a bigger picture on the figure, I don't know, it kinda looks right again. Even the previously criticized base doesn't look so odd anymore once everything is displayed together. In fact, some of the cruder elements, like the petrified mercy bar, really contrasts well against the more delicate parts of this figure, like the swords or the sparsely placed flower petals on her skirt. And if you are accusing me that I've just circled back to this whole mercy bar thing only to have another piece of chocolate, you have no right to judge my diet. By the way, stick around to the part of the video where I compare her sword straps to apple laces. Wow. One of the figure's highlights is her highly dynamic pose with this leap forward that might be difficult to set up, but ultimately is realized without any awkward looking support bars. You can really feel the energy on display. And of course, a release like this also has some subtle details that one only starts to appreciate when spending more time with it. Originally, I wanted to do a rule of 3 comedy bit where I compare those hidden details to Easter eggs while eating chocolate Easter eggs, but now it's mid-June and no store sells them anymore. Makes me so sad. But let's see if we can find all those phantom-like features. So first there are her slippers and the hairband that are painted in a glittery glossy finish. Not a common thing at all. Then there is a single flower on top of her sword where, if you do a bit of symmetry guessing, it appears that the 3 petals on the figure itself are missing from this stem. And one thing that I found especially appealing is that this one stone lantern is not just damaged, but also has this anime effect to it when someone cuts through it with a katana at lightning speed. The only downside to this action pose is that no matter how you frame or look at this, a leg or an arm will always be partly obscured by other body parts, so based on a still image it is kinda hard to guess what she is actually doing. But if you look at her from different angles in a 3D environment, your brain will be able to put together all this information and form a dynamic, well, almost moving image of her. So I would highly suggest that you display your Youmu in an open environment like a desk or maybe a glass showcase that can be looked from various sides, because if you put her in a confined space, maybe together with tons of other figures, this one might not reach its full potential. Another thing that really turned out well is Yomu's facial expression and the way it's painted. This determined stare really underlines the motif, and the way her pupils are shifted to the side makes looking at her from different angles even more viable. So if you have the possibility to display some of your figures on a permanently set up turntable, this might be the one to put on it. The paint job is also very good. Yes, some parts of the base, if isolated, might look a bit hastily done, but when everything comes together, it's a nice mix of different finishes and styles. I especially like how the strains on the back of her head have this blue shine to them that in theory radiates from the phantom part. Yeah, I mean, in a perfect figure dream world, this one would feature built-in LEDs for the clear part as well as for the stone lanterns, but sadly, we live in reality where figures and lights rarely go together. At last, her samurai swords as well as the arms that hold them are very well done. From the painted fingernails to all those fine details they put onto the scabbard, those are awesome looking pieces that deserve to be highlighted. All things considered, I stand with my judgment that this is one of my highlights from last year and easily a top tier depiction of Konpaku Youmu. It's dynamic, has a strong expression, but it still feels compact in size, so that it's not one of those figures that are cumbersome to display because of their over-towering base design. Solarain also put out a color variant of this figure, as they sometimes do with their major releases, but without the accomplishing red light from the promotional pictures here taken by Lucas Studio. This one lacks a bit in contrast to the already grayish base. But the blood red sword is admittingly pretty cool though. As for her price, 25,000 might sound like a lot until you realize that the yen is still in the gutter and this roughly translates to 150 bucks. Well, at least this was last year's price, because if you check now, the places that still have her listed, duty paid delivery might be almost twice the amount. So yeah, I'm glad that I picked her up initially at release, even if I stayed away from unboxing her for arguably too long. Next time, another pick from my ever-increasing pile of unopened figures. In fact, there are now so many, why not let Faith decide what to review next? Until then, take care out there and keep having fun collecting.